Hello and welcome to another how-to video by Clavister. In this video we are going to explain the default drop rule and the default access rule. But first, let's take a look to the environment that we are going to use. We have a firewall with two interfaces, IF1 with IP 192.168.2.44 and network 192.168.2.0/24. That is connected to a router with IP 192.168.2.10. The second interface, it has IP 192.168.1.10 and network 192.168.1.0/24. In that interface, our computer is connected with IP 192.168.1.1.24. So let's start with the default drop rule. The philosophy behind a firewall is that everything gets dropped unless is stated otherwise. In a firewall, you can allow or deny traffic using IP policies. Any packet that is not specifically defined in the IP rule set is dropped by the default rule. As you see, no IP policy is configured on this firewall, so the invisible drop rule will drop everything. Let's do a ping simulation and see what happens. We are going to ping Google DNS from our computer. As you see, the packet is being dropped by the default rule. This time, let's create an IP policy to allow ICMP from my PC towards Google DNS. I will name the IP policy test. Now, the only thing that is being allowed is ICMP. Now let's try to ping again. Same as before. As you see, the packet is allowed by the IP policy test that we created. Now let's try to ping another IP. As you see, the packet is dropped by the default rule. The same happens if we try to ping port 443 using TCP. The packet is dropped by the default rule. Now, we are going to explain the default access rule. We are going to use the same environment as before. In a few words, the default access rule means that you have a routing misconfiguration. Basically, default access rule is a routing problem. The interface has received a packet from a source IP that is not routed on this interface. The action for this is dropped by default access rule. In our setup, we have the following routing table. We're going to use ping simulation again to see what happens if I try to ping, for example, Google DNS with a source IP that does not belong to the network routed to interface IF2. And that's 192.168.1.0/24. As you see, the packet is dropped by default access rule. Troubleshooting default access rule is usually pretty simple, as it is always a kind of routing problem, either from a client or servers, switches, routing tables. The main problem is that we have received a packet on this interface that is not routed there. Your best friend here is the logs. They will immediately tell you which interface the packet was received on and from which IP. If you look at the example above, we clearly see that we have received a packet from an IP address that is not routed on that interface. For a clear view of the routing table, simply type routes in the remote console. Another CLI command that might be useful to you is route lookup, and then you type the IP in order to see in what interface the IP is routed. Thank you for watching.